Yeah, good evening, guys, and welcome to the Justice System podcast. This is a video addendum. There's also the audio version of this, which you can get on iTunes, Stitcher, all other podcast platforms, and apparently now, according to my emails, it's now available on iHeartRadio. So go and check it out there as well. Please forgive the voice. It's a little deep. It's a little raspy. I know. I'm fighting the flu, so there might be some coughing somewhere in between. I'll try and edit it out, but hey, that's life. So this week, it was supposed to be the return of the guys from Name Redacted. You might remember them from an earlier podcast I did back in 2017. And essentially what happened was in the final mixdown, from their end, the sound was a bit, it was really, really wiggy. So, unfortunately, I had to can the whole, and it was a really cool interview as well. It was such a shame, but they'll be coming back. We're gonna do another one. I don't know whether it'll be as off the cuff and the Star Wars references. Don't get me started on that film. That's all I'm going to say. Don't get me started on that film. Piece of shit. Piece of shit. And the boys from Name Redacted know it as well. Either way, we continue. We move on. We just have to just keep on rolling. So, what's going on with regards to this week's show? Well, this week's show is going to be more of a ramble, if you will. It's I really wanted to kind of talk a bit about just, I suppose in some respects, it's going to be a ramble, but it's also going to be quite a short podcast as well, because you're not really going to want to hear me going on and on and on about, this, that, and the other. But one of the things I want to talk about was, I want to talk about the UFC, which was a fantastic card. Shout out to Stipe Miocic. He did the job. People were doubting him. And I guess he's just a guy that you don't want to forget. The bottom end of it is, for anybody who hasn't seen the fight, doesn't know about UFC, number one, where have you been? Number two, get involved. Get involved. Probably one of the best combat sports out there that's currently in the mainstream consciousness. If you don't know what UFC is, and you don't know the name Conor McGregor, or you don't know the name Ronda Rousey, even though she don't fight no more, but that's another story. These names should be etched into the public consciousness, regardless of whether you know what the UFC is or not, because they're everywhere. They're synonymous. Either way, back to the case in hand. So, Francis Ngannou mashes up, completely tore up Alistair Overeem with what I can only describe as a dragon punch from hell. And if you don't know what a dragon punch is, oh boy, Google it. Just Google it. Yeah, it'll be quicker. And what my surprise was the fact that how vicious that uppercut was, and but then what really surprised me was that he was immediately in line for a title shot. Yes, it's a good story. It's a fantastic story. If you look at Francis Ngannou's background, his history, and so on and so forth. But I was very, very surprised at the speed in which they kind of brought the title fight around. Now, I don't know what the inner politics is in the UFC. Obviously, I'm just a spectator. But it certainly appeared that after 10 or something years of Stipe being, fighting and whatnot, excuse me, that now Francis Ngannou comes along and they're looking at him as the next big thing, because let's be honest, when Conor's not fighting, what have you got? He's just not really many big draws. So either way, something had to happen. So I can kind of see to one extent the reasons why they decided to do that. still, it's an interesting situation nonetheless. So Stipe Miocic just essentially smothered Francis Ngannou with wrestling, takedown, and I think Francis was planning on just trying to, throw the kitchen sink at him in the first round, and didn't anticipate that this round was going to go all the way. So, needless to say, went to points, and Stipe won. Spoiler alert. So I think really it's a case of make sure that you've got all your weapons well crafted if you're going into the UFC, and don't sleep on Stipe Miocic. Bottom line. So that's the UFC. So I guess really it is really going to be a very short podcast this time. But I'm glad that we're able to start getting YouTube up and running. One thing I'm not happy about, though, however, is the fact that YouTube has changed their policy in relation to monetization, and now you need big numbers in order to get monetized, which I think is a little bit crazy. But hey, what are you going to do? But this does, however, provide a new net to catch all the smaller contributors. Do you know what I mean? So I think that that YouTube might have really shot themselves in the foot with this one, and they're going to lose a lot of creative people who are looking to get content elsewhere. I think it's a shame. I really do. I think it's an absolute shame that they've decided to implement this rule to stop. It's clear that they're only interested in the people with big numbers and people who are trying to grow and galvanize a product are going to be left out in the cold. But again, this does kind of open up a platform for another provider to come along and just scoop it all up. Nevertheless, we just keep moving. We keep moving. We keep evolving, and we don't remain stagnant. And that's one of my words of advice that I would give to anybody who's looking to do anything creative, is to just keep on doing it. If you're an artist, keep painting. If you like to draw, keep drawing. If you play music, keep playing. If you like to speak, keep speaking. Go, debate club, whatever your thing is. Keep doing it. Keep working that muscle, because you never know. You never know when it can come into fruition and become something that could elevate your life and elevate it in ways that you never ever thought. But I do believe that that the creative process is something that we are drastically losing, and you've heard me in previous podcasts talking about the universal basic income, that I believe personally that with the advent of automated and artificial intelligence, that we are going to see a decline in manual labour, but at the same time, at that decline, I reckon that we're going to see a rise in the amount of people that become creative, that we're going to see people doing more things, that we're going to become a bit more homegrown. I know that there's a massive movement, there's a massive baking movement at the moment, and I'm not talking about the stuff that's on TV, the Great British Bake Off and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about just people who are really getting involved with with things like sourdough bread. That just seems to be everywhere right now. It's just crazy, and I think that with that and home crafting, woodworking, music, pottery even. Now that I thought was a dying art. I've got to be perfectly honest with you. I really thought that pottery was just like, out the window. But I'm seeing people just really getting involved with such beautiful work. Funnily enough, one of my friends, Wardy, has kind of quit his job. He was making a good living, doing web design for companies and putting it all out there, coding and whatnot. And he's shut all of that down to learn how to do pottery. And he's always been he's a cellist. He keeps bees, makes he kind of farms his own honey. He's got an active organic vegetables, eggs, the whole 9 yards. This guy's a powerhouse. And I'm like thinking, where do you get the time? And clearly he's found a way. And I think that is where we are going to be heading out. Because if you think about it like this, excuse me while I just sip my coffee. If you think about it like this, if the lights went off tomorrow, what would we do? We are so reliant on this. I mean, look at what I'm doing right now. I'm talking to you via a webcam that's up there, that's recording my image and goes out on an electronic platform, right? What if this didn't exist? What if all of this just came crashing down? And what would we do? What would we do? So the idea that we can actually get back and make shit, and that we're not reliant so much, the ability to, I'm not saying that we're going to be, fantastic engineers, because not everybody is. Let's face it. If I was to try and make, you remember back in the day when you're kids, do you know what I mean? And you make those go-karts with with rope to steer. Wheels were falling off, and the axle was made out of a cornflakes box or some crazy. Either way, what I'm saying is, I am not going to be able to, sustain. But I do know that that the way that my brain thinks, that I can retain knowledge and I can pass that knowledge on. So it's an interesting state of affairs that if the lights went out, what could you turn around to yourself and say, what do you think you could do to kind of lift a community? Because that's what would happen. We would all form these little hubs. We would have to, because it would be a fight for survival. Because there's absolutely no way, I think, as right now, and I'm talking about right now, as a species, that we are not able to deal with other people. We can't. We can barely deal with our next door neighbours, and I love my next door neighbours. I'm fortunate in that regard, but not everybody is, because we've been taught about otherness, and we're living in a world of deep distrust. There's so much going on. So the ability, if the lights went out tomorrow, for us to come together and all be one and it all be hippy dippy and lovely, it's very, 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 very doubtful. Nevertheless, my point is the fact that we would be in groups. So what would your position be? Could you lead? Could you teach? Are you able to hunt and gather? And can you make shit? So I always ask myself that question. And I know I can educate. I know I could, if it came to it, I would be able to cook. But I really don't know whether I would honestly be able to survive on my own. But if it was a case of me having to do it for my family, then it would be a completely different situation. And I would absolutely 100% die for my family in order to make sure that they had. And that's just the way it is. But I've kind of gone off the beaten track, and I did say it was a ramble, but I think that that with the advent of artificial intelligence, we are going to see a rise in the amount of people that are creative and who realize and tap into that potential, and it's going to be a very interesting time. So, with that being said, I want to give some shout-outs because I've had so many people who have subscribed to my YouTube page, which helped me get the custom URL, and it was all thanks to Facebook, the particular page being the Church of What's Happening Now page, and if it wasn't for that community, I don't think they would have that I would have been able to get that custom URL, and I wouldn't have got over 100 subscribers. And it's because of them, you know. I want to say thank you very much. So what I want to do is I just want to give some shout outs to some podcasts that I think, if you haven't listened to, you should check them out, because they are fantastic. So that would be the Church of What's Happening Now, obviously, with Joey Diaz. The Joe Rogan Experience, which is where I got my inspiration to start my own podcast. Russell Brand, Under the Skin, fantastic show. The Doug Stanhope podcast. From there, I was introduced to the wonderful James Inman, who was a previous guest on the show a couple of weeks ago. And as well, Let There Be Talk by Dean Del Rey. Fantastic dude. And it's always cool listening to him on his show. He's just got this real, like, turtle kind of, like, yeah, man, like, ooh, you know, it's got that real kind of surf attitude, and I just totally dig the way he talks as well. Also want to give some personal shout outs as well. Shout out to the Fiji Mermaid, you know who you are. Joe Broussard IV, Scott Cunningham, Nick Howe, Mike Dowd, Adam Diaz, Ed Mendez, my core, Kieran, Kia, Aiden, Sierra, Tim Alexander from Primus, Mad Drums, Billy Murray, Terry Stone, Tony Todd, Chris Nielsen, Alex DiAgostino, my boy Danny Cullen Roach, John Damon, and Anjali Bamani, aka Symmetra from Overwatch. Thank you very much, guys, for your contributions. And I like to say, without you guys, there wouldn't be a show, and there probably wouldn't be a custom URL YouTube channel either. So that being said, I just want to say thank you very much. Next week's show will be Fitzy from, you know him on Twitch TV, and he's got a very popular t-shirt, Fitz Says You Must Die. So if you don't know who that guy is, go and Google him. And very, very interesting conversation that we had, talking about my show, talking about Twitch TV, and the future of streaming, and where we're going. And then things got a little deep, as Fitzy got a little personal, and I don't want to give too much away. I would say tune in next week, because it does get deep, and it literally came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it. So until then, I want to say have a great week, and I will see you next Monday with the powerful Fitch from Twitch TV, and playing you out on the audio, not on the YouTube, unfortunately, because of monetization rules. It is Black Knight, as promised to the powerful Dean Del Rey, from your boy, Max Justice. Black Knight by Deep Purple. Take care. See ya.